here to give you some kind of rambling discourse on Matthew McConaughey's Greenlights, because it is kind of in and of itself a rambling discourse and should be met with such. First, let me position myself to the material. I have spent time around Matthew McConaughey. In the mid to late 90s, I worked for a film producer named Linda Obst. She is mostly, she's still alive. Sorry, Linda. She is mostly known for her rom-coms. One Fine Day, Sleepless in Seattle, but she also produced a little film called Contact, based on Carl Sagan's novel, and little Matty McConaughey, as I always think of him. I never called him that to his face. He's not little, but he called me Pigtail, and I would be like, it's a ponytail, Matt. So I feel like it's only fair that I can refer to him as little Matty McConaughey. He was in Contact. So I did not work on the set of Contact, but I did get to attend the premiere. And then when we were filming Hope Floats, Matt and Ethan Hawke and some others were filming Newton Boys nearby. And so we were on and off each other's sets pretty regularly, doing things like intra-crew softball games and the like. So yeah, so I've spent some time around seeing him, and so having kind of already known his vibe, I was curious to read his book. We have some other commonalities. We both grew up in small town Texas. My town was not quite as small as Uvalde. And now the town that I grew up in is much, much larger because a Sun City moved in and that retirement community just kind of boomed. Also, I grew up in a town a bit north of Austin, and though the town was pretty isolated, insular, kind of off on its own, thanks to urban sprawl, that town is now just simply much, much bigger. It's a booming suburb of Austin. We both went to UT and attended the film school there. I am 6 or 7 years younger than Matthew, so we weren't there at the same time, but we were obviously in and around Austin at the same time. I love Austin as much as Matthew does. I would go back to Austin for the food and because I still have a lot of friends and family in the area. But for political reasons, I can't imagine going back to Texas, honestly, to live unless things change massively. Also, Austin just isn't the town that I grew up with and fell in love with. It's been kind of overrun by Californians, and now I'm a Californian, and if I went back to Austin, I'd probably be seen as some kind of outsider, evil person, because California money is pushing Austinites out of their hometown, and it sucks, and, capitalism sucks in so many ways. But anyway, all this to say, this very long intro is just positioning me in relationship to reading Matthew's memoir, because rather than approaching it as somebody who's never met the guy, never spent any time around him, I'm approaching it as somebody who has spent some time around him, kind of, I won't say knows him, and he wouldn't remember me, but I do remember him calling me Pigtail, and I would be like, it's a ponytail, Matt, and he'd be like, nah. But also just some weird things, like the fact that he was in True Detective, and some of the story from that first season of True Detective is lifted from my family history. My dad's cousin by marriage was found dead in a cane field in the Erath, Abbeville, Louisiana area, and that was kind of one of those jumping off points for True Detective, if I'm understanding where some of the story comes from. So yeah, we just have some weird intersections, I would say. So, this book though, it is largely chronological, linear in that way, starting with Matthew's childhood and pushing through to, this was published in 2020, so pushing through to his 50th year on the planet. He was born in 1969, so in 2019, around the time when he would have been writing this, he would have been 50, turning 50. He does a lot of mental gymnastics to kind of condone some of the, I don't want to say bizarre, because it's not actually that strange or unusual, the behaviors of his parents, particularly his father, but also his mother, who had a tumultuous relationship. They were married 3 times, divorced twice. So they got married, then they divorced, they married each other again, divorced, married each other again, and were married until his father's death. And his mother became a widow. His father, it's weird because having, again, grown up in the culture of small town Texas, like the behaviors, the making a man out of you kind of thing doesn't surprise or shock me. I'm very aware of that kind of thing being not uncommon, particularly, these men and their relationships to their sons. But at the same time, in a more enlightened world, reading that kind of thing made me deeply uncomfortable. And the fact that Matthew's just like, this is how it was, and I finally earned my, man cred, basically, this way, and my brothers earned it that way. It's kind of a toxic masculinity thing. And Matthew works really hard to show himself as enlightened and like laid back, but I do think there's probably a lot of trauma involved that he's either kind of choosing, he wants to say, oh, but look, I've decided to embrace it in a positive way or something like that, and you kind of just want to say, yeah, but have you just seen a therapist though? Like, his therapy is like going in an RV all over the US and traveling to the Amazon to chase a literal dream that he had, and then to Africa to chase yet another literal dream that he had. Another weird intersection though, he goes to Mali, which one of my best guy friends was in Mali for the Peace Corps, and I used to get mail from literally Timbuktu. No, most of my mail I think came from Bamako, but it's just funny. I was like, oh, Mali, I'm aware of it because I actually have some very cool stuff that my friend sent me from when he was living there. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like Matthew and I have some weird parallels because Texas, but we're in California. I don't know if he's actually back in Texas now, but he also loves New Orleans, and that's where like my family originates, or at least my father's side. So again, I think I can look at this book with a lot more kindness than some people did. Some people found it very narcissistic, but I think this is very Matthew, like just based on my interactions with him and around him. This is just quintessential him being him, and he is kind of a pseudo philosopher, and he's got poetry in here, and he honestly, I think, wants to help other people, and he thinks his worldview can do that. And I think for some people it will be very useful, but there are things that are omitted here that like he's just like, and then I signed with an agent while I was at UT Austin, and I'm like, how did you find this agent? Why did they sign you? Was it because you happened to be a good-looking white kid? Like, he was like a hand model, right? And things like that. It's like, some of the nuts and bolts, he kind of veneers over the things that kind of are part of his privilege. And yes, he grew up lower middle class, same as me, but had the good fortune to be a good-looking white guy, and you know, was able to make connections that maybe wouldn't be open to everyone. So his green lights, though he did work hard and has worked hard in a lot of ways, a lot of his green lights do stem from an amount of, there's an amount of hustle involved, but there's also an amount of privilege involved that he doesn't really address at all. You know, he's like, oh, I had an agent, and then I met a guy at a bar. You know, I'm like, are you telling people you should hang out at bars in order to meet the people who are going to help you? Or like, how is that? And that's also just very specific to a certain time in Austin, when that was possible to just hang out on 6th Street and run it. I mean, I hung out at places, you know, Quentin Tarantino would be there and Robert Rodriguez would be there, because that was the point in time when those people were hanging out in Austin. They were talking about turning the old Robert Mueller Airport into a film studio, which I don't think ever happened. But, you know, there was a time when that felt possible. Matthew talks about living in Tarrytown. That's where Linda Obst also had her house, because I remember having to go to Tarrytown to get stuff out of the house she was, I guess, renting, leasing, I don't know. I think she had a more permanent house in Pflugerville? No, I don't know. Someplace, one of the towns that had, like, was trying to become a wine country type thing. That might have been Pflugerville. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting lost in my memories again. But as for the book, like I said, it's very matte, and like, it's both chronological and therefore logical in that way, but a little bit choppy, and just the way he kind of is like, oh, and then this, and then this, and then I met, you know, my wife when I finally quit looking, and I just happened to see her and decided to, like, introduce myself to her, and this and that. He talks about feeling certain ways, but he doesn't go in depth in things in some ways. There's still a lot of guardedness in that way. Like, it's weird because he has this talent for seeming very open and laid back, when in actuality, if you look at it at all closely, there's a lot not said or explored. He's very much picking and choosing what he's going to show and talk about here. And that's fair. I mean, he's a person and a public figure, but he has the right to decide what he wants to, you know, share about himself, his feelings, his life. So, yeah, a lot of the, like, notes and poetry, a lot of it is typed, thank goodness, but just as much of it seems to be facsimiles from his actual handwriting, some of which is very hard to read. And towards the end of the book, I was no longer trying to read or all of his, like, long kind of sidebars that were like pages long. You know, I no longer was like, he has like whole, you know, things here where I was just like, yeah, I don't care enough to sit to really read it. If it was short, I probably did read it, but the 1 and 2 page long things, I was like, nah, I don't like it enough to spend that much time on it. It's not even that long a book. I think 291 pages, and then 2 or 3 pages of acknowledgments and notes or whatever. But Yeah, I mean, it's less than 300 pages long total, so not a super long book. And because of the way it's done in these kind of, you know, segments, some longer than others, obviously, pretty quick read. And, you know, lots of photographs and stuff too, and, you know, that kind of thing. But, yeah, a lot of like bumper sticker type things, stuff like that. But yeah, it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. Like I said, a lot of people were not fond of it, or maybe of his life. Not fond. I'm not saying they weren't fond of his life. They weren't fond of his viewpoints, or I don't know. Some people, because his wife is 12 or 13 years younger than him, they were like, oh, he was a predator. I'm like, see, I don't know. I never got that sense. I knew him before he met and married, so I don't know what their relationship is like, and we are obviously only getting his side of the story here, but they are still married as far as I know and have 3 kids, same as me. And that's funny to me because his oldest was actually born the same year as my middle child, so I actually have kids that are older. And even my youngest is older than his 2 younger ones. So, yeah, he's older than me, but he got started later, I guess. But, you know, again, his wife is younger. So, you know, they seem happy. They seem fine. I don't know. It works for them. So I'm not gonna, you know, unless I hear or see or read otherwise from her, I'm not gonna fuss about it. But yeah, I mean, I would say this book's pretty authentic, as much as he's chosen to share. And as far as I can tell from having spent time around him, it seems very Matthew. So yeah, 3 stars from me because I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was anything mind-blowing. There were a couple of quotes, though, that I found really interesting and handy. Actually, it was something that one of the guys in Mali told him when Matthew apologized for something. He said, "You better be different, not sorry." And that felt like a really important little gemstone to me. You better be different, not sorry. That's kind of the thing I'd like to say to people who wrong me, or, you know, I you know, and then say they're sorry. I don't want sorry, I want different. So yes, be sorry for it, but also going forward, be different. That felt like a really important little nugget, and that's something I will take away from this book. So that was worth the price of admission right there, right? So anyway, if you've read it, let me know how you felt about it. And it doesn't really, like I said, it doesn't really talk a lot, except when things happen on sets that were meaningful to him. It doesn't really talk a whole lot about his work. And that's fair too, because when you're working on film sets, it's kind of what happens on the film set stays on the film set mentality. You don't, you know, there's a certain amount of, yeah, you're just not gonna go out there and air the laundry, as it were. Not if you want to keep working in the industry. Anyway. But anyway, yeah. Again, if you've read it, let me know your thoughts. If you've worked in film, let me know about it. Let me know about your experiences within reason. Again, if there's stuff you're like, yeah, I'd tell you, but I don't feel like it's safe to say it in public. I've been there, I know that. And yeah, next I'm reading a book called The Shadow Key, I think. I don't know, I picked it up at the library, and it's like a historical set in Wales or something. I don't know. I'll let you know how I feel about it. I tried to read the Percy Jackson book. couldn't get into it, weirdly. I felt like Hecate is my thing. Like, I don't know why I couldn't, I don't know. I got 50 pages in, and I was like, this is just not working for me, so I set that one aside. And then I picked up a different book from the library called The Book Swap, and it was just so morose. I didn't get very far in that one either. That one's going back to the library, but maybe The Shadow Key will be better. I'll let you know. I read like the first chapter, and so far so good. We'll see how it goes. In any case, until next time, now that I've done my rambling, until next time, take care.